He never told us who built it. The house stood on a small hill ringed by trees. Its walls were made of sawn logs, and its roof was covered with bark shingles. It had a covered porch with polished branch pillars. There were windows of blown glass that were as clear as a pond in winter. It was of poor materials, and yet no one could deny it was made with care. Every plank sanded smooth and not a nail out of place. There was no path to the house. There was no outhouse that could service it. No one knew what the inside looked like. No one lived there. Yet every week, we cleaned it. When you hear the word cult, you think of doomsday. And we were not obsessed with things as trivial as the end of the world. We never talked about fire, brimstone, or when God was going to burn the sinners to bone, saving us and us alone for his band of immortal worshipers. All we talked of was the house and how to keep it clean. Our leader, Mike, wasn't crazy. All cult followers say that about their leaders, right up until the poison passes between their lips. But I don't believe Mike was actually insane. He did horrible things. I've had time to come to terms with that, to realize the depths of his depravity. But to us, he was soft-spoken, kind, and generous with his time. He didn't ask for money. He refused the bodies of the cult members offered to him in lust. He was still married to the wife he had met 40 years ago, decades before he had found the house and created his cult. She made cookies on Wednesdays that she shared with the children. No, the only thing crazy about Mike was how much he cared about that house. In his stories, we were told he found it while backpacking across the mountains. Mike said something drew him to it, something deep within him. He went inside and saw many wonderful things. He never told us what, but he didn't have to. Whenever he talked of the house or of going inside, his face would take on a sheen, an illumination. Younger me never thought to explain away the phenomenon or question it. I believed with a simple faith. Such was the power of the house. When Mike spoke about it, he glowed. It was not long after going inside that Mike started the preservation community. And with that, our cult was born. The police, in their filings, determined our group to be a sex cult. I think that's oversimplistic. Yes, everyone who could was either making or having babies. This was not for fetishistic reasons. It was purely economical. More children meant more hands to clean and preserve the house. It might have been wild and orgy-like when Mike brought the first group to the settlement back in 1974. But by the time I was born, sex wasn't a passionate affair of the heart anymore. It was a science. Couples were chosen at the beginning of their childbearing years, around 15, and they were selected to minimize the inbreeding quotient of the community. Each couple was expected to produce a minimum of one child a year. The resulting children were divided into 3 groups: the cleaners, the gardeners, and the offereds. 10 days after a child was born, Mike would take it from its parents. He, his wife, and an attendant would go into a special part of the woods. Mike would meditate, trying to discern what group the child would best belong to. Sometimes it took minutes. Other times it took hours. Once, it took him a full day to decide. I often volunteered to serve as the attendant that would accompany them. I would watch Mike make his decision. I liked to wonder what he was thinking, trying to predict what group he would choose. All the babies looked the same to me, small and soft. I never was able to guess right, even though I tried for years. Once he had decided, the sorting would begin. If the child was to be a cleaner, the attendant would provide Mike an eyedropper full of bleach. His wife would hold open the baby's eyes. Mike would then put 3 drops into each orb. The process would be repeated until the child had gone completely blind. There was a 98% survival rate. Once they were blind, They were proclaimed a cleaner. If the baby was to be a gardener, Mike would be given a long hypodermic needle. His wife would secure the child's head, and Mike would rupture each of the baby's eardrums. Again, the process would be repeated until the child was completely deaf. This process was notably less traumatic, and the child would usually stop crying once they were given a few sips of morphine-laced milk. If a child was selected to be an offered, they would be taken away and given to the nursing mothers. Their selection ritual would come at a later date. While cleaners and gardeners were given back to their parents, those who gave birth to offereds would never interact with their child again. When an offered was sorted, we would spend a night in mourning for the parents, for the child, and for the community. Sometimes children would be born naturally blind or deaf. Mike called this a great mercy. These babies were seen as special and given the moniker of self-selectors. I was a self-selector. I was born deaf and sorted into the gardeners only 8 days after my birth. My parents were gardeners. They were grateful to have a child born into their own sorted group. The gardeners and the cleaners had little reason to speak to one another. The cleaners communicated vocally, while the gardeners only used ASL. For gardener parents to have a cleaner child was akin to seeing the child die. It did not happen frequently, but it was not impossible. Beyond the needs of infanthood, each group trusted the parents of the others to care for the children they were unable to take care of themselves. Such a thing was the only link between our two groups. All my friends were gardeners. We were taught hand signs from the beginning so we could speak to each other. At school, we were educated in botanical matters and taught how to tend a lawn, weed a plant bed, and mix the correct quantity of fertilizer and soil. We never knew what the cleaners were taught, as they used no visual aids. We would see them gathered and huddled at their class space near ours in camp. I would see their lips move, and I would wonder what they were saying. Once we had turned 10, we were deemed old enough to be put on rotation. Every week, 20 names would be drawn by Mike from 2 large wooden bowls, one for the gardeners, one for the cleaners. Those whose names were drawn would be washed clean at sunset, then anointed with blood drawn fresh from Mike's arm. They would then ascend the hill towards the house and begin the ritual of care. The cleaners would enter the house one by one, cleaning supplies in one hand while they groped into the darkness with the other. The gardeners watched from afar until the door was shut. Then, once it was full dark, we would turn on our camping headlamps and make our way to the lawn. We would begin accomplishing the many chores Mike required us to do. The older ones took the responsibility gravely, but not us, the youngers. We felt no danger from the house, despite the repeated warnings. We didn't just ignore the rules, we flaunted them. A rule oft-repeated to us gardeners in training was to never look inside the windows of the house. Whenever we would question why, most would just more forcefully repeat the rule. Others would try to explain, but their explanations would be confusing and did little to quell the curiosity of a child. So naturally, we made a game of it all. We often speculated what could be in the house. Many of us had grown up in tents and could only imagine what these things called rooms even looked like. The adults would not discuss the house's interior with us, and so we imagined it to be a continuation of the forest where we lived, with plants growing on the ground and water running in streams through the length of it. One child, Patty, claimed to have snuck inside one night. She claimed she saw great trees and that everything was larger on the inside than out. For weeks she held us captivated with her stories, making us beg for more. I, along with my friends, loved the tales and believed them wholly. Actually, Believed feels too weak a word. I had hoped beyond hope that they were true, but they were lies. I was 14 the night Mia and I were selected for gardening duty. I remember that night with exact clarity. I will for the rest of my natural life. Mia was my friend. We were born in the same week. That day, sunset came, and we were washed. Mia splashed me with water, and I did the same to her. We giggled as we were reprimanded, and hid our smiles as we were anointed with blood. We climbed the hill, signing to each other our secret jokes, and not thinking much of the work that needed to be done. Once the cleaners had entered the home, we turned on our lamps, still joking to one another in the dark as we pulled weeds and cut grass. At around midnight, the moon disappeared behind a small layer of cloud. The small amount of silver illumination it had provided vanished. Our headlight beams cut clones in the darkness, and still we were unafraid. We were beneath a window, planting new wildflowers in the bed beneath it. I was in the middle of signing to Mia how Danny, another gardener, had tried to kiss me after our class the other day, when a small sliver of golden light split the air, blinding us. Mia and I looked up and saw that the curtains in the window had been pulled apart a fraction of an inch. We had heard of things like this happening, but we had never experienced it ourselves. We never knew that there were lights inside of the home. I was breathless with awe. We stood and looked at the glowing slice several seconds, just basking in the radiance. It was my idea to peek inside. I told Mia we could see if what Patty said was true. Mia was a non-believer of Patty's stories, and that was enough to sway her to my side. I could tell she was nervous. Mia liked to joke, but was easily frightened by new things. We had an argument over who should be the one to actually look. I had suggested it, but there was a nervous excitement that kept me from pressing my eye up to the glass. We were breaking a rule after all. We played a game of rock, paper, scissors to see who would look. That felt fair to us. I won. Mia lost. Mia looked at me, and I thought for a moment she wouldn't do it, but she steeled her face and gripped the edge of the window with her fingers. My heart thudded in my chest, and I almost told her to stop. I wish I had. Mia checked to see if no one was watching, then put her face directly into the thin beam. She peered into the house. For 10 minutes, she did not say anything. After the first minute, I asked a question. She ignored me. I tried to get her attention, and still she kept her eye fixed on the window. I started to panic. She had never behaved like this before. I grabbed her arms and shook. Her muscles were like iron, and she was frozen in place, staring. Something had gone wrong. Something was happening to her. I tried to pull her away from the window, but she just gripped tighter to the sill. I pulled, and the light cut off. Someone on the inside had closed the curtain. Mia collapsed and fell back on top of me, and I rolled her off to see if she was okay. She was staring off into the distance, her mouth open and her pupils large. She swallowed a few times, then blinked. She shook her head and sat up. I asked her what she had seen. What was in the house? She never answered me. She got up, turned, and went down the hill.
The next day, Mia was not in our usual class. I asked my teacher where she had gone. They did not want to tell me, but I kept asking until they were forced to answer. I was informed that Mia had volunteered to become an offered. She was to be given the next week. While we had no fear of the house as children, we did fear the offered. We did not discuss it amongst ourselves, but the adults were often talked of them quietly, wondering who was next for the ritual of giving. The ritual process was relatively simple. Once a month, after the cleaning and weeding, the gardeners and the cleaners would ascend to the hill. They would gather in 2 large bodies, forming a path up to the threshold of the home. Back at camp, Mike would go to Offord. He would ask for volunteers. If there were none, he would personally select someone among their ranks to be given.
Before I speak of what happens next, there is something you must understand. To us, the Offord were not human beings. They were Homo sapiens in species only. While their genetic code might have been the same as mine, they possessed no other qualities that would suggest cognizant life. From an early age, they were kept from all forms of knowledge. They were not taught to speak. They were not taught to read, and they were not taught to write. They were fed twice as many meals as the rest of us, double portions. Volunteers would tend to their every need, keeping them docile and receptive to orders. They behaved as animals, just as Mike Quitley had designed them. Most did not live beyond 15. Sacrificial lamb. After selecting an Offord for the giving ritual, Mike would take them to the place of sorting. It was fitting that the ritual of giving should be begun in the same spot where they were chosen all those years ago. Mike would take chloroform that he had purchased on one of his many trips to town. He would force the Offord to take several deep breaths. Their eyes would go glassy, and their minds would move somewhere beyond the realm of mortality and into the void of unconsciousness. Then, with a knife, he would cut out their tongue. The wound would be cauterized with a repurposed branding iron. The lips would be sewed together and pasted over with a combination of papier-mâché and wax. Once the Offord awoke, they would be in great pain. We would give them morphine injections to help them relax. They would return to their docile forms, almost like nothing had happened at all. Once they were prepared, Mike would personally lead them up the hill through the groups of gardeners and cleaners. They would go slowly, like the guests of honor at a funeral procession. After ascending the hill, they would stop at the porch. Mike would then lead the Offord onto the porch and to the front door. More morphine would be administered if they tried to struggle. Mike would then open the door and lead the Offord inside. He would let go of them, step out, and shut the door from the outside. Then we would wait. Mike claimed this was to see if they would re-emerge, but they never did. Seeing the Offord enter the house was the last we would ever see of them on this mortal coil. For an hour we would stand vigil outside a silent house. Then, one by one, we would leave. A month would pass, and then the ritual of giving would take place again, month after month, year after year. Mike allowed for any members of his community to become an Offord if they so desired. It was seen as a form of self-selection. It was rare, but it happened. Mia took this option. The entire week before she was to be given, I couldn't bring myself to see her. I felt too much guilt, but I knew I had to visit her one last time before she entered the house, before she vanished forever. So when the time came for the ritual of giving, and Mike asked me to be his assistant, I reluctantly said yes.
I had only seen the process once before. The Offord had been a larger boy. After the surgery, he had woken in rage and pain, so much so that he had torn up a tree. I was afraid this would be a similar experience. The night of the ritual, Mike and I went to go get Mia. When we arrived at the Offord part of camp, she was sitting by herself. The other Offord gave her a wide berth. They seemed scared of her. Mia's face glowed with a strange light, the same light Mike's face had when he spoke of going the inside of the house. It was almost like she was still looking in that window, taking in whatever was there to see. Mia jumped to her feet when she saw Mike. She smiled and made her way over. For the first time in my life, I saw Mike look uneasy, but he took her hand and led her to the place of preparation. On the way, I tried to get Mia's attention. She would not even glance in my direction. Any hopeful thought I had of helping her escape was dashed. Mike didn't even have to drag her like some of the offered. She skipped to the surgery table and laid down with a smile. Mia took in deep whiffs of the chloroform and went to sleep. She was still grinning, even when we pried back her teeth and took out her tongue. We branded the wound and steam came out as the blood vaporized. We sewed her lips with a hot needle and plastered over her mouth with papier-mâché and wax. I went to wash my hands, as I thought that would be the end of it. But Mike turned his attention to her hands. I signed to him, asking what he was doing. He explained that she could not be allowed to speak. Mia could speak with her hands as well as her tongue. My entire body went cold as I understood what he was saying. I swallowed back tears and got to work. Removing Mia's hands took longer than anticipated. We cut away the flesh, broke the bone, and cauterized the veins and arteries. We sewed a leftover flap of skin over the wound. We wrapped white gauze over each stump, which quickly grew red with blood. She had lost a lot of it, and I was worried she would never wake up. But Mike assured me that she would. They always do. As we waited for her to wake up, Mike and I sat in silence next to each other. I started to cry. I leaned over and felt Mike's arm wrap around me. As he comforted me, I confessed to him what had happened at the house. I told him about Mia looking in the window and how I was the one that told her to do it.
Mike listened. He didn't seem angry, only sad. Once I was done, he asked me a question. "Did you look inside?" I told him I didn't. He asked another question. "Did she tell you what she saw?" I told him she hadn't. Mike nodded, then looked at the grass. I could tell he was thinking. It was the same expression he had when he sorted the babies. "You are telling the truth," he signed to me. "Otherwise you'd be begging to go inside as well." It took a long time, but I finally gathered enough courage to ask Mike a question that had been burning inside of me ever since Mia volunteered to be an offered. "What is inside the house?" Mike looked at me, and for a moment I thought he would answer. Then he turned away. After a moment he signed, "When it is your turn to go, I will tell you." We didn't talk anymore after that. Eventually Mia woke up and we gave her the painkiller. She didn't need it. Her eyes were bright the moment she rose up from the table. Once the shots were administered, she got up without any help and set off on her own in the direction of the house. Mike and I followed behind her. Up the hill, up past the crowds. They all watched us solemnly. I could see Mia's parents sobbing when we passed them. They tried to sign to their daughter, telling her to come back, to not go, but Mia didn't even glance in their direction. Mia and Mike reached the threshold. I found my place in the crowd. I watched as Mia stepped onto the porch. Extra painkiller was offered, then refused. Mike led Mia to the door and opened it. Without even looking back, Mia stepped inside. Mike closed the door, and we waited. After an hour, people began to leave. After another hour, only me, Mike, and Mia's parents were left. By the 5th hour, it was only me and Mike. I was tired, but I didn't want to sleep. I kept hoping that Mia would emerge, that the doorknob would turn and she'd come out excited to see me and ready to put aside whatever craziness had gotten into her head from looking in that window. But I knew it was a false hope. She was gone. Mike left to give me some alone time with the house. I cried and walked back to the flower bed where Mia and I had only a few days ago been dreaming about what was inside this cursed house. I looked at the window, and even with all the horror of the past day, I felt myself wanting to look inside. I wanted to see what had made Mia so willing to give up on life itself so she could be there with it. But the curtains were drawn tight. So I turned and made my way down the hill. I don't know what made me do it, but halfway to camp, I looked back. Something was written on the window. The letters glinted in the moonlight. They must have been written in the time it took me to get to the bottom of the hill. At first, I thought the words were written in black. I made my way back up to the house, and they became more and more red with each step.
They were written in blood, Mia's blood. My heart stopped when I read what they said. The words spelled out my name and then a message. Mike lies. Room evil. The next day, I snuck into Mike's car when he left to go to town. I didn't tell my parents or anyone. We were never forbidden to leave. It's just no one ever did. No one wanted to. Only now do I realize how strange that sounds. Once we arrived in town, I got out of the car and ran to an alley. The buildings were huge. I had to stamp down my awe. I had never known you could build things so tall. When I looked back at the car, I saw Mike staring in my direction. He looked sad. I didn't wait to see if he would chase me. I ran away as fast as I could. I don't think he even tried to follow me. The police found me. I told them about Mike, the house, the community. They were never able to find it, even though they tried several times. I was never able to give them the right location. Eventually, I was reintegrated into society. I went to public school, spent time in the foster care system. I'm grown now, and the world has changed a lot. I've changed too. But I never forgot the house, the window, and the blood glinting in the moonlight. Yesterday, I was looking on Google Maps for the forest where I used to live. I had done this many times before and found nothing. I never really believed it would work. But this time, something caught my eye. A peculiar shape. A small circle of green light with a dark speck in its center. I zoomed in, and my heart skipped. That roof, those shingles, the house. Young me wanted to stay away for good, but older me has had time to think about Mia, about what happened that night when she looked in the window. That light we saw has festered itself into my brain. Those questions still remain. What did Mia see? What is in that house? And why did Mike lie about it? Maybe if I go back, I'll figure it out. Mike owes me some answers.
I am a French 32-year-old woman, and I have questions about my first paranormal experience. Every night, two entities on my left and right introduced themselves to me as angels and told me that I was not allowed to open my eyes during the journey to God. I was lying down and I felt my spirit dissociate from my body, as if I were being carried up to heaven. Every night, the same angels took me to see my Creator. So far, you could say it was a dream. But every morning, before opening my eyes, I had the same feeling of returning to my body, with these two angels repeating that I was not allowed to open my eyes and saying nothing else. It was always my last memory before falling asleep and my first upon waking up. What do you think? Do you have any childhood memories involving angels?
I met Dave on Snacks. It's a dating app. It came highly recommended by my coworker, Debbie. She would brag about the places her dates would take her, how sweet they were. I was skeptical. She never had the same date twice. Every Friday there was a different guy. But who am I to judge? She seems happy. I could really use some of that right now. Snacks was a cute app. First-time users got the terms of agreement and an ingredients list to sign off on. The profile pictures of the men were displayed on generic food icons, canned chili, bananas, cartons of milk. It gave "have you seen this child" vibes. Debbie wasn't joking when she said the men were attractive, maybe even out of my league. I don't want to sound shallow, but I know how I look. I've never been the conventional beauty queen. But I love myself, and I deserve to be happy. Dave's icon was a birthday cake. He looked like the best mix of funny and cute, the kind of guy I could share my struggles with, maybe even put both our struggles in the same place and work on them together. I don't know what the next step is, but when he looks at my profile, I hope he sees in me, as I see him, a good deal.
I didn't have to wallow in my anxiety for long. Dave messaged me that night. We made plans for Friday. The rest of the week was filled with Debbie's giddy grin every time Dave messaged me. We had so many interests in common: lo-fi music, scary stories, spicy foods. My heart fluttered at the thought of him. My disappointment unbearable when I get a notification that isn't him. Friday morning, Debbie could tell I was feeling nervous. A good nervous, though. Butterflies, she called it. That's her favorite part, she said. That's what Fridays were for her now, thanks to snacks. We met at a carnival not too far from my house. We agreed to skip the roller coaster in favor of the haunted funhouse, ate chili fries, painted each other's faces, and failed to rescue a goldfish by missing bottlenecks with little plastic rings. Soon the sun, like my hesitations, was completely gone, and we held hands as we walked back to my place in the dark. Inside, on my couch, I lean in for a kiss. He stops me. He points to my phone. I have a notification from Snacks. It can wait. But Dave stopped moving. His arm feels soft, spongy. It crumbles. My nostrils fill with the smell of sugar. I can't help myself. I'm compelled. I take a bite. It's cake. I eat him, all of him. What did I do? I felt like he was the one. Why did I do that? I checked my phone. Thanks for your purchase. For overnight dates, please subscribe to Level 2 service. Snacks, edible dates.
I used to think I was a good judge of people, that I could tell when something was off. Now I'm not so sure. When Tom moved in, I didn't think twice. A friend of a friend had mentioned he needed a room, and my old roommate had just moved out. Rent's expensive, and Tom seemed normal enough when he came by to look at the place. Quiet, polite, even a little shy. We split rent, set up the Wi-Fi, went grocery shopping once together. He liked instant noodles and those cheap iced coffees. Simple guy. At first, living with him was easy. We'd say hi in the hallway, sometimes eat at the same time, but mostly stayed out of each other's way. I like that. I work late shifts, so I often got home around midnight. The apartment was dark, calm, predictable. Until it wasn't. The first thing I noticed was how often Tom was awake when I got home. I'd unlock the door, and he'd already be standing in the living room. No TV, no lights on. Just standing there. The first few times, I thought I'd startled him. But he never jumped, never moved. He'd just look at me and smile faintly. Couldn't sleep? I asked once. Yeah, he said, something like that. After that, I started hearing him walk around at night. Slow, steady steps up and down the hall. Sometimes he'd stop right outside my door, just stand there. I knew because the old wood floors creaked whenever someone moved. I'd stare at the ceiling, frozen, waiting for the sound to stop. He never knocked. By morning, everything was normal again. He'd be sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal like nothing happened. When I tried to bring it up, he'd tilt his head slightly, confused. I was asleep, he said. You're sure you didn't dream that? I started double-checking the locks at night, making sure my door was closed tight. But sometimes I'd wake up and it would be open, just a crack. Then came the smell, a faint, metallic scent, like old blood or rust, drifting from his room late at night. I told myself it was pipes or food gone bad. I even tried to peek in once when he wasn't home, but his door was locked. After that, I started keeping my phone next to my bed, recording audio through the night. The first night, nothing. The second, soft noises. Breathing. Too close. Too human. The third, I heard my door open. When I listened back, my stomach dropped. The hinge squeaked, then a pause, and then a quiet voice, almost a whisper. You sleep so still. I confronted him the next morning, shaking, voice barely steady. Tom, were you in my room last night? He smiled, calm, too calm. Why would I do that? His tone was light, almost playful. You should get more sleep, man. You're starting to sound paranoid. That night, I didn't sleep at all. At 4:27 a.m., I heard a faint sound again, a soft scrape beneath me. At first, I thought it was in my head. Then I heard breathing, slow, deliberate, under my bed. I leaned over the edge, heart pounding, and saw two eyes staring back at me. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't scream. The eyes didn't blink. Then his voice, calm, quiet, too close. I didn't mean to scare you. I jumped out of bed so fast I nearly fell. Tom crawled out from underneath, brushing dust off his clothes, as if this was normal. What the hell are you doing? I shouted. He blinked slowly. I just wanted to be close. What? He tilted his head. You always sleep with your back to the door. You're so quiet. I wanted to know what it's like to be that close to someone without them knowing it. He said it so softly, like it was something tender, something intimate. I couldn't even breathe. He stood up, looked around my room like he was admiring it, and smiled faintly. I didn't hurt you, he said. Then he walked out, closing the door gently behind him. I sat there until sunrise, knife in hand, every sound amplified. When I finally opened my door, his room was empty. No clothes, no toothbrush, no trace he ever lived there. I called the landlord that morning. He sounded confused. There's only one tenant on the lease, you. No one else was supposed to live there. I swear Tom was real. I met him. I spoke to him. There were dishes he used, receipts in his name. But now, it's like he never existed. I moved out a week later. I don't tell people why. I just say it was too quiet there. Sometimes, though, when I'm lying in bed in my new place, I swear I hear it again. A faint scrape, a slow breath, just beneath me. And I can't help but thinking about what he said that night. I just wanted to be close.
That smells incredible, honey. My boyfriend Tom beamed as he stirred flour into a roux on my stove. We normally ate out for date night, but Tom said he wanted to surprise me. The potatoes need another few minutes, he said, probing a spud with a fork. Then I'll put the steaks on. Rare, just how you like it, he added with a smile. You know me so well, I chuckled. After dinner, I have a surprise for you. No kidding, he said, raising an eyebrow. I actually have one for you, too. I guess tonight will be full of surprises, huh? I joked. It sure will, hun. It sure will. As Tom set the table, I snuck back to the bathroom. I held the test up to the light, making sure I was reading the result correctly, but there was no denying it. I was pregnant. I didn't know how I'd tell Tom. We had never even discussed kids, and we hadn't been together very long. On top of that, we'd had a few nasty arguments recently, but I hoped this would bring us closer than ever before. After dinner, Tom offered me a glass of wine. He seemed a bit suspicious when I refused. Since when do you turn down Pinot? Well, I said, chuckling nervously, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I have something to tell you too, Tom said. I was so nervous that I barely heard him. I'm pregnant. I know, Tom said, sipping his wine, and I want to break up. My voice hitched in my throat. What? I blurted, lost for words. I found your test, Tom said, his voice like ice. I can explain everything, I said weakly. Oh, can you? He cried, rising to his feet. You disappear every night, you hardly touch me, feed me bullshit excuses, and now you want me to raise another man's child? I found my voice again, so insulted I could barely breathe. There is no other man. I only love you. Do you think I'm stupid? He hissed. We've never even had sex. It's not what you think, I swear. The children will be yours. The fuck do you mean will be? He barked. If you'll just let me explain. You know what, Claire? He asked, draining his glass. I'm leaving. Good luck being a single mom. I began to panic. I wanted Tom, needed Tom. I wanted him to understand. He couldn't leave. I had Tom pinned against the wall faster than he could blink, my strength taking his breath away. How did you do that? He choked out. As he trembled in fear, I kissed him, long and deep. Oh, Tom, I said, my species can only reproduce under very special circumstances. As my venom began paralyzing his muscles, he tried to scream, the sound dying on his lips.
My husband and I were watching the Texans destroy the Ravens when I asked Nick if he wanted another beer. Nick let out a grunt, which I took to mean, yes, my beautiful and loving wife, I would be thrilled if you brought me a beer. On the long walk to the kitchen, I checked my phone and saw the dreaded red battery, so I took a detour to our bedroom to plug it in. That's when I saw it. On my husband's side of the bed was a charger I'd never seen before. Black and bulky, it was long enough to reach all the way across my side of the bed. Get lost on the way to the fridge? Nick whispered in my ear. I jumped. Don't do that, I said, smacking him in the shoulder, and then adding, what's with the new charger? My husband flew across the bedroom, yanked the charger out of the wall, and stuffed it in his bedside drawer. I've never seen my husband move that fast. You weren't supposed to see that, he uttered. My husband was hiding a terrible secret. I could tell from the guilty look on his face. Nick, I said in my most polite and understanding voice, why did you run across the room to hide something I already saw? Okay, Nick let out a deep sigh. I'll tell you. Thank you, I said, crossing my arms. I didn't want you to see that charger, Nick confessed, because it cost me $57 at the Come and Go. Huh? I know money's tight, and it was stupid to pay that much, but it was an emergency. I was waiting on a call from my boss, and I couldn't find mine, and I panicked, and... Don't worry, I interrupted him. It's fine. Really? Nick asked. Really, I said. Now let's get you that beer. Nick was lying. A wife always knows. I conferred with my friends, and they all said the same thing. A new charger means a new phone. A secret phone. A phone he doesn't want me to see. So, I told Nick I was going to the movies. Then I drove around in circles and came back home. I snuck in and quietly headed to our bedroom. If Nick has a secret phone, I'll bet he's keeping it in that drawer, hiding it in plain sight. And if Nick is cheating on me, I'll divorce his ass so fast his head spins. I gently crack open the door to our bedroom and freeze. Nick's sitting in the corner of the room, his eyes closed. He's using the black charger again, only it's not plugged into a phone. It's plugged into Nick's ear. There are soft lights blinking up and down his neck, some of them yellow, the others green. Holy shit! I slowly closed the door. What the fuck was that? I tiptoe back to the stairs. You weren't supposed to see that, Nick whispered, and then shoved.
Tommy Morgan did not have the best life. Coming from a broken home, the young 11-year-old only experienced the worst. His father would return home drunken like a skunk,
and he would get into heated arguments with his wife over money and how, since he was the bread maker, he could do with his earnings what he saw fit. Tommy's mother would do chores around the house, her eyes red from sobbing. Tommy himself would receive whippings from his father for the slightest of offenses. It always came with the hollow assurance that it would build character. There were many things that the boy despised, his father being number one on his list. A day never went by in which he dreamed of getting revenge on him, but it was all but a fantasy. His father was big and stout. As far as Tommy was concerned, his father was an unconquerable Goliath to his David. Thoughts of running away crossed his mind, but he did not have the heart to abandon his mother to the brute. He thought that he would never be able to get rid of him, at least until that day. One of the few joys Tommy had in life was Halloween. On that holiday, he could discard his miserable life and become anyone he wanted to be. The candy and decorations were also a plus for him. His father, despite everything else, would, at the very least, spruce the house up for All Hallows' Eve with a spider made of old rags here and a papier-mâché ghost there. On a particular day, he brought home a skeleton. The skeleton was roughly his size, being 6'5" in height. It was dry, with some visible cracks around the ribs and spine. It was missing a few upper teeth in the back, likely from years of wear and tear. Its hollow eye sockets were jet black and devoid of life. The bones, yellow with age, made a slight thump sound against the wall any time Tommy's dad would swing the ancient artifact back and forth. It looked absolutely fragile in his colossal hands. He explained that he got the decoration from an old antique store, bragging about how much he swindled the store owner to get the skeleton cheap. He placed the skeleton in the bench on the porch and returned inside without much thought. Resuming his drinking, once more he got into a fight with Tommy's mother, this time over her wanting new curtains. Tommy left the house and sat on the bench with the skeleton. He vented his complaints to the decorative piece, not thinking much about whether he would be heard, but he nevertheless felt at ease talking to someone. From there on out, Tommy found himself loving the skeleton. Each day he would talk to it and would take care of it. Anytime leaves would fall on it, Tommy would blow them off with a leaf blower. When it rained, Tommy covered the skeleton with rags. For a second, he could have sworn that the skeleton was receptive to his acts of kindness. During one instance, when he was gently wiping the skeleton's arm, Tommy heard whistling. From the direction he was looking, it appeared that its teeth were clattering. However, Tommy chalked it up to the wind blowing through the skeleton's mouth. Beyond his days spent with the Halloween decoration, Tommy's life continued as normal. His parents would argue over the tiniest of offenses, and his mother would resume doing chores around the house with tear-streaked eyes. Tommy would continue to receive beatings that his father thinly veiled as discipline. During dinner, Tommy accidentally dropped a glass, causing it to fall on the floor and break into a million pieces. As his father was beating him, there was a sudden thumping coming from the porch. Alarmed, the three paused to listen to the sudden noise. Whatever was out there paced back and forth on the porch, stomping as hard as its foot would allow. With bated breath, Tommy's father approached the door, opened it, only to see the skeleton in its sitting position. Once more, it was attributed to the culprit being the wind. For the next few days, the thumping would continue. The repetition ate away at Tommy's father, spurring him to leave home and remain out for longer hours. In his dreams, he was tormented by the skeleton. He would find himself in bed, alone. The skeleton appears at the foot of his bed, and it slides over his body, just coming short of his neck. His dad would wake up with a jolt and refuse to sleep the rest of the night. However, Tommy's dreams were starkly different. He would receive sweets and other confections, and his father would be far away. The skeleton would stand by, looking at him in the distance.
Eventually, Tommy's dad couldn't take it anymore, and during a stormy night, he gathered the skeleton and tossed it in the back of his truck with little hesitation. Poor Tommy was awakened from his deep slumber, only to see the skeleton that he cherished being driven away. He ran to the door, but the truck bolted to life and bucked its way off the driveway. Heartbroken, Tommy returned to his bedroom and cried himself to sleep. The next day, his father returned, and so did the skeleton. Surprised at first, Tommy was grateful that his friend was back. Even more bizarre, his father was kinder. When Tommy accidentally broke a plate, instead of the whipping he was anticipating, he was instead given a stern but fair warning about how he could have hurt himself. There were no more arguments over money, which meant that his mother was now at peace. Their marriage also improved, and the two seemed more in love with each other in all the years of their life. However, Tommy couldn't help but notice that his father was acting weird. He moved around as if he were a stranger in his own skin. His legs would wobble and knees buckle from the smallest of movements. Sometimes the skin around his face would slide, forcing him to push it back up with his spare hand. His jaw would hang agape as he ate, which translated to shoving food into his mouth at the back of his throat. Tommy learned the truth on Halloween. When he stared at the skeleton on the bench, there were no cracks on the ribs. In fact, instead of being ancient, the skeleton appeared to be fresh and, dare say, even more lifelike than before. It even had a full set of teeth. Shocked, Tommy turned to look at his father, who stared at him for what seemed an eternity before giving a wink.